I froze as Michael's hands balled into fists, his gaze blazing with fury. "You believe you can answer me like that, Sarah?" he sneered. Before I could respond, he lunged at me, his face contorted in anger. He lifted both hands and smashed them into my midsection, sending intense agony through my already injured form. Struggling for breath, I grabbed my ribs, powerless and restricted to the hospital bed. The coppery taste of dread filled my mouth as I heard sounds of people rushing towards the entrance. Would this horrible situation ever cease, or was this the point where I'd forfeit everything? My identity is Sarah. I'm about 45 years old, a homemaker and the mom of an 8-year-old girl named Chloe. To an outsider, my existence might look flawless, married to Michael, a man who once pledged endless affection and joy. But appearances can be misleading. When Michael and I first crossed paths, he was everything I thought I desired, assured, focused, and full of charisma. He captivated me without effort. We met at a casual get-together hosted by a shared acquaintance, and the instant our eyes connected, I felt a connection I'd never known before. Michael appeared ideal, always knowing the perfect words to utter, the appropriate actions to take. In roughly 18 months, I was sporting his ring and envisioning a future I was convinced would be lovely. I resigned from my stable position at a design studio to embrace the lifestyle Michael imagined, a classic home setting where I'd concentrate on domestic life and assist his profession. Initially, it felt like the correct choice. Michael lavished me with affection, surprising me with flowers and organizing romantic nights out. His guarantees of a promising future made every concession feel justified. Yet once the initial phase of romance passed, Michael's attitude shifted. The man who had once doted on me grew distant and uncaring. Praise transformed into fault-finding, and his thoughtful actions disappeared entirely. Rather than inquiring about my day, he began highlighting everything I hadn't completed to his liking. The spotless house and freshly prepared meals I had previously enjoyed making were now simply expected, and anything less was met with his displeasure. Whenever I attempted to voice my emotions, Michael would simply brush me aside. "You're just a stay-at-home wife, Sarah," he'd remark with a smug expression. "It's not as if your life is difficult." His comments stung deeply, but I suppressed my pain, telling myself I needed to remain resilient for Chloe. My daughter deserved a secure environment, even if it meant tolerating Michael's increasing apathy to provide it. Over several years, I came to understand that the person I had fallen for was no longer there. Michael had become unfamiliar, someone who no longer viewed me as an equal, but as someone to boss around and find fault with. What I had once thought was a perfect situation had slowly devolved into a terrible reality, yet I clung to the hope that perhaps one day things would improve. Michael's fault-finding became a regular presence in my life, a gloomy shadow hanging over every moment. Regardless of how much effort I put into keeping the place perfectly clean or ensuring supper was ready when he walked through the door, it was never sufficient. He invariably found something to criticize. "You missed a spot on the countertop," he'd say as he tossed his briefcases onto the kitchen surface. Or, "Why hasn't Chloe gotten ready for sleep yet? What exactly do you occupy yourself with all day?" His remarks felt like small nicks, gradually wearing away my self-assurance. Initially, I attempted to reason with him, explaining how much work I put into managing everything, but my explanations were consistently ignored. "You're simply inventing reasons, Sarah," he'd answer. "You have one main responsibility, to look after this dwelling and our relatives." Why is that so challenging? Michael's frequent switches between jobs only worsened matters. Each instance he arrived home with news of being dismissed or resigning, he would point the finger at everyone except himself. His supervisors were unjust, his colleagues unskilled, and somehow, he managed to spin these setbacks into reasons why I was the one disappointing him. "You're meant to simplify things for me," he would declare. "Instead, you're merely another issue I have to handle." I frequently felt as though I was raising two young ones, Chloe and Michael. While I did everything to ensure Chloe's early years were joyful and secure, Michael's erratic temperaments made it a perpetual struggle. He would find fault with her as well, reprimanding her for minor issues like leaving playthings on the floor or speaking too loudly. I found myself intervening, attempting to protect her from his severity. "Don't use that tone with her," I'd state assertively, only for him to redirect his anger towards me. "Perhaps if you'd instructed her on some order, I wouldn't be required to, he'd retort sharply. As more time elapsed, I ceased trying to debate. It was draining, and I understood it would only escalate the situation. Instead, I concentrated on Chloe, dedicating all my energy to providing her a sense of steadiness and care, even as my own resolve diminished. Michael, conversely, seemed to flourish by asserting authority. The individual I had once looked up to had become someone I hardly recognized, a man whose dialogue and conduct left me feeling insignificant and unseen. And yet, I remained for Chloe. I convinced myself, holding on to the hope that things might improve someday. It was a standard Wednesday afternoon, and I had just completed my market run. My thoughts were consumed by the extensive list of chores awaiting me back home, fixing the evening meal, reviewing Chloe's schoolwork, and neatening the cooking area. As I walked across the road with provisions in my arms, I never noticed the vehicle approaching. The shriek of the tires and the loud honk were the final sounds I heard before everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, I was lying in a hospital cot, my body sore and unable to move. Both of my lower limbs were in supportive coverings, and every inhale sent intense discomfort through my chest cavity. A medical attendant stood next to me, explaining that I had been struck by a fast-moving automobile. My injuries were significant, and my healing process would span several months. In those initial few days, I felt completely unable to help myself. Activities I had considered routine, sitting upright, eating, even reaching for a drink, were unachievable without help. My folks, Beatrice and Robert, became my crucial connection, visiting me every day and looking after Chloe while I was restricted to the medical facility. They delivered food, assured me that Chloe was managing well, and attempted to brighten my mood with their continuous encouragement. Michael was nowhere to be found. I had anticipated him rushing to my side the moment he heard about the mishap. Instead, there was nothing but quiet. Days progressed into weeks, and he still didn't appear. Each time the entrance to my hospital cubicle opened, I wished it would be him, but it never was. When almost a month had passed, Michael finally showed up. As he entered the space, his look wasn't one of worry or remorse. It was irritation. He stood at the end of my bed, arms folded, and uttered his initial statement since the incident. "Do you have any clue what a trouble you've turned into?" His words struck me with more force than the vehicle that had left me incapacitated in this bed. I gazed at him, trying to grasp the harshness of what he had just vocalized. How could he hold me responsible for this? How could someone I had sacrificed so much for behave towards me in this manner? "What are you implying?" Michael's harsh, biting remarks bounced off the walls in the sterile medical chamber. "Have you any notion of the extent to which you've become a burden?" he restated, his voice devoid of warmth and dismissive. I struggled to rise slightly, my damaged form protesting with every small shift, and stared at him in disbelief. "I didn't request this, Michael," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I didn't opt to be struck by a vehicle." He snorted and came nearer, standing above me like someone pronouncing a verdict. "You suppose that changes anything? You're just lying here inactive, and now I'm expected to manage everything. I cannot bear the expense of this, Sarah. You must sort it out." Moisture gathered in my eyes as his words sliced through me. "Sort it out? I'm unable to even walk, Michael. What do you anticipate I can do?" Michael's look grew stern. "Liquidate your ornaments," he snapped. "You possess more than sufficient to handle this difficulty. I refuse to spend another penny on you." I froze, the impact of his callousness silencing me for a moment. "Are you serious?" I whispered softly. "Following everything I've done on your behalf, this is how you treat me. You are my spouse, Michael. You are meant to provide assistance." "Assist you?" he barked out, his voice elevating. "You're unproductive now, Sarah. I have to sustain this family by myself, and you're no longer capable of contributing." The air in the enclosure felt thick and heavy, stifling, as his fury erupted. I could no longer remain quiet. "I've done nothing but be there for you, Michael. I abandoned my professional path for your sake, brought up our child, and maintained our residence functioning while you moved from one job to another. And now, precisely when I require you most, you label me worthless." His face contorted with fury. "You imagine you can reply disrespectfully?" he yelled, slamming his hands down onto the border of the bed. "You are not allowed to issue commands. I recoiled slightly, but before I could react, he charged ahead, his hands tightly balled, and he hit me in the abdomen with both of them. Suffering surged through my injured form, leaving me struggling to breathe. The area seemed to spin as I attempted to comprehend what had just transpired. The discomfort from Michael's assault spread throughout my system, leaving me breathless and clutching my midsection. Before I could fully make sense of what had occurred, the entry to my medical room flew open. A nurse and a security officer hurried in, their expressions a mix of surprise and resolve. "What is happening in here?" the nurse demanded, positioning herself between Michael and me. She provoked me. Michael yelled defensively, his hands still formed into fists. "She's destroying my existence." The security officer acted instantly. "Sir, move back at once," he instructed, seizing Michael by the arm. Michael resisted, but the officer tightened his hold. "You are required to depart right away." Michael faced me one final time, his face pale with intense anger. "You will regret this, Sarah," he snarled. "This matter is not concluded." As the officer led him away, I felt a blend of apprehension and reassurance. My body ached. My spirit was broken. But for the initial time, I understood I could no longer remain quiet. Michael's harshness had reached a stage of no reversal. The nurse bent over me, examining my hurts. "Are you all right?" she inquired softly, her voice filled with sympathy. Tears flowed down my face as I gave a weak nod. "Kindly, just ensure he stays away from me," I whispered. The periods that followed were among the most challenging of my existence. My parents, Beatrice and Robert, became completely involved, guaranteeing I was never by myself. They managed every aspect, from looking after Chloe to communicating with the medical facility administrators about submitting an official complaint against Michael. Their constant backing became my point of stability amidst the turmoil. Physically, I was mending, but the emotional wounds were more profound. Every time I shut my eyes, I envisioned Michael standing over me, his hands raised in fury. The recollection of his assault repeated in my mind like a terrible dream I couldn't escape. Despite the suffering, I recognized I had to initiate steps, not solely for myself but for Chloe. I began consulting with an attorney, Rebecca, who guaranteed me that Michael would be held responsible for his conduct. "You've endured plenty, Sarah," she stated resolutely. "It's time to resist." For the first time in ages, I felt a glimmer of optimism. I wasn't merely enduring anymore. I was getting ready to seize authority over my future. The choice to oppose wasn't simple, but it was essential. Michael's aggressive outburst at the medical center had confirmed what I already understood. I couldn't permit him to persist in dominating or harming me. For Chloe's welfare and my own, I had to make certain he faced the repercussions of his deeds. With the support of my parents, I started accumulating everything required for my legal matter. Rebecca, my legal counsel, was a sharp and resolute lady who swiftly became my most dependable supporter. During our initial consultation, she listened attentively as I described years of Michael's emotional mistreatment and the physical attack in the medical facility. "You have a robust case, Sarah," Rebecca assured me. "Between the medical personnel's accounts and the health documentation detailing your injuries, we can establish his actions without any question." Hearing those remarks provided me with a fresh sense of drive. I collaborated with Rebecca to gather proof, from the medical staff statements to photographs of my contusions taken immediately after the occurrence. My parents also aided in compiling paperwork demonstrating Michael's lack of care and his history of monetary carelessness. Each piece of evidence depicted a distinct portrait of a man who had spent years attempting to demolish me. The legal procedures were exhausting, but I declined to yield. Michael, in contrast, attempted to unnerve me from a distance. He left vocal messages alternating between hollow apologies and barely concealed menaces. "You're wrecking my existence," he stated in one. "If you believe you can triumph, you are mistaken." I did not reply to any of his transmissions. Rebecca recommended I stay quiet and allow the facts to speak for themselves. "Don't grant him the pleasure of a response," she advised. As the court appearance neared, I dedicated myself fully to my recuperation. Physical therapy was agonizing, but each minor achievement, standing upright for the first time, taking a single stride, served as a reminder of my resilience. Chloe's cheerful giggling and my parents' steady backing kept me moving forward even on the most challenging days. I wasn't merely getting ready for a court conflict, I was taking back possession of my existence. For a long time, Michael had deprived me of my self-assurance and autonomy. Now, I was resolved to demonstrate to him, and to myself, that I was more capable than he had ever conceived. The day of the legal proceeding arrived, and I felt a blend of apprehension and resolve. Wearing a plain yet self-assured ensemble, I entered the courtroom with Rebecca accompanying me. My parents were seated in the public section, their comforting smiles a constant wellspring of fortitude. Chloe, being too young to grasp the circumstances, remained at home with a reliable caregiver. Michael was already seated at the table for the defense, his formerly confident bearing replaced by clear discomfort. His attorney whispered rapidly into his ear, but his gaze repeatedly flicked in my direction. The person who had consistently sought to control me now appeared like a mere outline of his former self. Rebecca commenced the presentation with a straightforward and exact recounting of Michael's actions, starting with the physical assault at the medical facility. The nurse and security staff provided testimony, describing in detail the instant they intervened during Michael's aggressive episode. Their declarations were convincing, creating a clear image of the strike. Subsequently, Rebecca produced the health documentation, which itemized not only the injuries from the collision, but also the extra contusions resulting from the blows. Images of my injuries were shown, and I could sense the impact of the proof settling within the judicial chamber. Michael's legal representative tried to minimize the event, terming it a moment of displeasure and asserting that Michael had already issued an apology. But Rebecca was having none of that. She systematically dismantled every excuse, highlighting his past of emotional mistreatment and failure to provide care. "This is not simply about a single event," Rebecca stated, her voice steady. "This represents the accumulation of years of harshness, deceitful influence, and aggression. Sarah has tolerated ample amounts, and it is time for her to be granted fairness." When David gave his testimony, his efforts to put the blame elsewhere seemed feeble and unpersuasive. "She's blowing things out of proportion," he mumbled. "I provided everything for our family, and she's the one attempting to destroy me." Sarah questioned him without letting up. She made David confess his shortcomings as a spouse and parent, leaving him clearly distressed. When she was done, his justifications had completely fallen apart. After hours of court proceedings and discussion, the judge announced the decision. David was declared responsible for battery and mistreatment in the home. He was given a jail term of around 16 months and required to pay considerable fees, such as reimbursement for my health costs. When the hammer hit the block, I felt a burden disappear. Fairness had been achieved. As the court hammer fell, confirming David's guilt, a feeling of freedom washed over me. Things were finally made right. I walked out of the court building with my folks next to me, their comforting closeness constantly reminding me I wasn't fighting this on my own anymore. After years, I felt a feeling of liberation, the liberty to create a life where Maya and I could do well without being scared. In a few weeks after the decision, I discovered a comfortable small flat in a calm area. It wasn't big, but it had all I needed to begin anew for us. Every piece of furniture and item of decor felt like a sign of getting my life back. Settling into our new place gave me a fresh feeling of direction, and Maya's giggles filled the rooms, making the place feel hopeful. Set on providing for her and ensuring our future safety, I chose to try something different. One night, while Maya and I were looking at online clips, a thought came to me. What if I told my experience, not just the hard parts but the courage it took to get through them? With my folks' support, I began a video channel online. I began putting up videos about my path, getting through a harmful marriage, standing up for what's right, and starting a life all over again. My aim wasn't only to share what happened to me, but to give hope to others facing similar tough times. I spoke about bouncing back, looking after myself, and finding happiness in little wins. Surprisingly, people started relating to what I shared almost right away. In just a few months, my channel expanded quickly. People watching left genuine comments, sharing their own experiences and thanking me for giving them motivation. Companies contacted me about working together, and the money I began earning from my channel was much more than I expected. After many years, I felt I could manage my money on my own. Having a successful channel meant I could not only make sure Maya's future was safe, but also chase after goals I had given up on a long time ago. I began setting aside money for her schooling and organizing enjoyable trips for us, making memories I hoped she would treasure always. Our little flat turned into a safe place filled with happiness and laughter. Each evening, when Maya and I made food together or sat on the sofa watching her preferred programs, I felt incredibly thankful for the life we had created again. I wasn't the person David had attempted to destroy anymore. I was tougher, more knowledgeable, and more content. And with Maya beside me, I knew our time ahead looked promising, didn't it?